Your Excellency, the Prime Minister, Raila Amolo Odinga, my colleagues, two colleagues from Parliament, and patron, my friend Agnes, and all my comrades and colleagues who are here. Good morning. Good morning again. It was indicated to me that I should talk about the BBI, but when I met this young man, Anthony Manyara, and he told me he was an architect, he gave me a reference point on how to contextualize what I want to talk about the BBI. And we are privileged to be talking to you as young men and women who are in educational institutions, and not just ordinary educational institutions, but institutions of higher learning. Now, I want you to take your minds many, many centuries ago. And before I take your mind there was my favorite Tanzanian member of parliament, who unfortunately is no longer in parliament. He said some words last year, ya kwamba kuna watu wana akili na umeweka mfukoni. And he further went and said, better ideas, big ideas, dominate small ideas. And this is the conversation I want to carry out around the BBI. But I go back to Mr. Manyara. Nearly 2,000 years ago, there was a building which was built in the city of Athens, known as the Parthenon. If you look at that building, it is a classic building, a building of antiquity. And look at the Capitol building in the United States of America, which was built 2,000 years later. Men and women in the United States of America, after the revolution, when they were building their parliament, they had to get inspiration 2,000 years ago on how to construct their own houses of parliament. And you look at the columns in that building, the Parthenon, in Athens, which was built more than 2,000 years ago. Now, that building could not have been built by ordinary tools. It couldn't have. Go to Egypt, our own continent. Look at the pyramids. More than 4,000 years ago, in fact, 5,000 years ago, one stone alone that was used to build the pyramid could hardly fit in this room. They used tools 5,000 years ago to build pyramids. And that was the domineering civilization at that period in time. That 5,000 years ago, the dominating civilization was here in Africa, in northern Africa. Now, if you go to Rome, there's a building, those who go to Rome now, called the Colosseum. It is the biggest amphitheater still standing. You can compare it to any biggest stadium in the world, and they would still not beat the Colosseum, which was built in the year 440 BC. 440 years before Christ. They built a building, a Colosseum. There's no stadia in the whole of Africa that is bigger than the Colosseum, which is still standing today. It has been ravaged through wars, but it's still standing. Imagine what type of tools were used to build the Colosseum 500 years before the birth of Christ. 500 years ago. And in southern Africa, there's another kingdom known as the Great Zimbabwe. If you look at the ruins of that city, they could not have applied the ordinary tools to build that city. Because that Shona Empire was a great empire. It was a trading empire. And Africans in the 11th century were building one of the biggest cities in the world, known as the Great Zimbabwe. Now, man and humanity, the development of man and humanity is surrounded about discovery of tools. The first known tools in the Stone Age were made more than 2 million years ago. 2 million years ago, our forefathers knew how to fashion tools in order to make sure that humanity progressed. And that's the big difference between man and beast. If you do not consider man and beast as the same species, we can make tools. There are very few animals that can make tools. Now, coming closer in time, in England, Napoleon derided the British because they used to say that Britain was a nation of shopkeepers. This time, Napoleon, they were fighting wars all over Europe. But I forgot to say there's been that historical rivalry between the British and the English and the French. At that time, Napoleon was looking down on England that you're a mere nation of shopkeepers. In fact, by that time, England was already a major naval and mercantilist nation. They are doing trading all over the world. But the French were looking down upon them because they were saying, you're just a nation of shopkeepers. But that was like a challenge. Voltaire said, probably that was a complimentary remark by Napoleon because immediately after mercantilism, there was a great agricultural revolution and the Industrial Revolution. And then the discovery of the steam engine, people like Isaac Watt, the great scientist. And England became a major force in the world because it had great ideas. It had great ideas. Now, coming closer in time again, there are these Asian tigers. South Korea. Do you know the difference really between South Korea and the rest of Asia? It's because they thought big. When other Asian countries were talking about cottage industry, they thought about 4 things: education, industrialization, trade, and innovation. When countries in Asia, a lot of them were thinking the way we are thinking, that you can build a modern civilization by an implement on one wheel. And not to talk about when the wheel was discovered. I don't know. The wheel, I think again this was a discovery of the Chinese. Now, the Koreans were a poor nation, South Korea. And they decided we are going to make a difference by believing in education, industrialization, innovation, and technology. And look at where Korea is today. President Obama, when he was here, he said one of the rising nations is going to be India. And India went through that phase when they depended so much about small developments in agriculture and industrialization. But look at what India's done when it opened up. India, I think, is going to be the second or third largest economy in 4 or 5 years because they started thinking big. Now, in Kenya, we are thinking small. And shame to us that when we should be competing with the best economies in the world, we are thinking so small. How do we compete with Korea? Or Vietnam, which has just come out of war, Vietnam was, had a war which involved France and the United States for a long period. It was a war zone. So, my dear sisters and brethren, if you want Kenya to progress, we must think big. And think big about ideas of the future, not ideas of the past. I don't know whether I'm making any sense. Really, I'm telling you. And this wheelbarrow narrative is not even old school. This is degradation. It's like admiring the Stone Age man when people are going to the moon. A few African countries, I think in the next 10 years, are going to send satellites, to the cosmic moon and Mars. China is already, catching up with the United States. So when people are fashioning machines and instruments to go to Jupiter, to Saturn, to the planets, Kenyans are talking a wheelbarrow. Really? Shame unto us. Now, how relevant then is the BBI? Because if you look at great constitutional, BBI also has not interfered with the structure of devolution, which is an important pillar in our constitutional setup. And my hope is that the government of Kenya will not reduce any allocations going to the counties. This is one of the things we may fight with the Jubilee government, whatever formation of the Jubilee government, that there should be no reductions on allocations which are made to counties. And thirdly, and it has been talked about, the Youth Council. The Youth Council, the Youth Commission, if you look at the way it is structured and framed within the constitutional provisions that are coming as a matter of amendment, they open up space for young men and women to not just be players, but important participants in the economy and in progress. And fourthly, the civilian authority of the constitutional government, of the government as established under our constitution, has not been interfered with. What now remains is as a people, what can we do to make sure that this document succeeds? I think without you as young people to help us, first of all, spread the word as contained in this document, and also campaign to ensure that this document goes through. We will need your participation. And for me, Agnes, I think I'm meeting new friends and partners so that we go to the ground together. Our next meeting, probably, we should be looking for some of you to go with us together so that you help us talk to the people of this country in a language that they understand. And sometimes, most of the time, you talk the language that, they can understand. It can take me an hour, but probably it'll take you 10 minutes to communicate to the young people what this document is all about. So I urge you that together, we stand together in this great journey in trying to make the Building Bridges initiative work. And I just want to conclude by, in my own understanding of the law, there will only be not a question or multiple questions. There will just be a bill. There will just be a bill. And if you read Article 257 of the Constitution, it does not talk about a question. It talks about a bill. But I know in the Elections Act, there's reference to question or questions which are not about amendment of the Constitution, but on a referendum which the President can initiate on any issue, but excluding a constitutional amendment bill. So I think it's the appropriate time for me to stop so that you can be addressed by His Excellency the Prime Minister. Comrade power! Power! Comrade power! Power! Team! Asante sana. Now, Agnes, are you coming to invite His Excellency? You want me to do it? Okay, I've been given the privilege now to invite the Prime Minister, Raila Amolo Odinga. Can we rise up and clap for the Prime Minister? Thank you.